It's been said that the fish honors the fisherman when it decides to strike. It might also be said that the fisherman honors the fish when he chooses fly fishing over other forms of angling. To the uninitiated observer, fly casting may seem overwhelmingly difficult. The way the fly caster seems to defy gravity and physics when he hurls a weightless line 50 or 100 feet through the air looks to many like an impossible feat. But fly casting is something that can be learned in a relatively short period of time, provided that one understands the principles of successful fly casting and spends a few hours practicing the feel of applying these principles. Mel Krieger has been helping people understand the principles and master the feel of fly casting for over 15 years. Today, he is recognized as one of the true masters of the fly rod. Over the years, Mel has developed a comprehensive teaching program that progresses from a basic understanding of the principles of fly casting to the mastering of complex casts, such as the double haul. Until now, this teaching method has been available only to those able to participate in the schools which Mel directs. But even then, it's almost impossible to retain the wealth of information packed into these 2 or 3 day intensive programs. Now, with the help of video, Mel is able to share his techniques with you personally in a form that you can refer to again and again as your fly casting stroke progresses.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Whoosh. Casting a fly is so much fun. I think it's the real reason that I enjoy fly fishing so much. Casting a fly is just a pleasurable thing to do. You know, and most of the time you're not catching fish, you're fishing. It's fun to cast a fly. In the next hour or so, we're going to show you everything about fly casting, from the roll cast to the double haul. And hopefully, we're going to teach you how to become a competent fly caster. What is this thing called fly casting? How do we really do it and get started in it? And what is the definition of it a little? You know, in spin casting, or in plug casting, what we do is we take a weight. We take the lever that's a rod and we wind up and we hurl the weight through the air. And it pulls a skinny line behind it. And that's how we present a lure or bait or something to the fish. In fly casting, what we do is we take a weighted line. That's what this is, this thick weighted line. And we roll the line back and forth in the air. We roll it this way, and we roll it this way. We cast back and forward, and roll that fly out onto the water. And that whole cast, from here to here, we can call that a casting stroke or a casting arc. This casting arc often changes position and size during our casting and fishing. In fly casting, the back cast and the forward cast should be in a straight line. That means, for example, that a cast that's parallel to the water in front should be parallel to the water in back. In order to get a higher back cast and a lower forward cast, it becomes necessary to tilt the entire casting arc forward. This high back cast may be needed in fishing situations to clear obstacles behind you. And sometimes we tilt the casting arc backward to get a higher forward cast. This cast might be used to get the best trajectory for a good distance cast. Good fly casting also requires a variation in the angle or the size of the casting arc. A narrow casting arc is needed for short cast and minimal rod bend, while longer cast and more rod bend require a wider arc. Don't limit yourself to the old-fashioned 12 o'clock to 2 o'clock or 11 o'clock to 1 o'clock or whatever. variable casting stroke is the basis of modern fly casting. In casting, we really have to keep control of that arc. And I can do that with a firm wrist by casting like this. If my wrist loosens up a little bit and I start casting like this, you can see what happens to the arc. We lose it. Now that doesn't mean that you can't cast well by flopping your wrist around. There's some great casters that cast like that. But I think in order to learn, by keeping a firm wrist, you'll keep control of that arc and you'll cast better. There's another very important reason for keeping a firm wrist, and that's the transfer of power from your arm and body into this fly rod. If you were a piece of machinery and transmitting power from your body to the fly rod and had a loose connection here, you couldn't do a very good job. It wouldn't be a very efficient transfer of energy. You can do this as hard as you can and get a reasonable amount of line speed. But if you want to do it most efficiently, I'd really like you to try to almost lock your wrist and cast with your forearm in this manner. Don't let it flop around like this. Keep it firm and force the rod to bend. Force it to load. Loading the rod is simply bending the rod as we're applying power to throw the line. It's a little bit like a bow and arrow. We force a bend into the rod by keeping a firm wrist and sling the line out. That's what fly casting is. Now let's take a look at how we hold the rod. Let's go right into form and fly casting. There are all kinds of wonderful grips, but I'm going to show you a grip here that I think is the finest possible grip for a variety of reasons. This grip is called the extended finger grip, and it looks like this. My fingers are extended along the rod with my thumb essentially about on top of the rod. It's about like this. I'd like you to take a pencil in your hand or a rod butt right now and try holding it like this. It's a little bit like holding a screwdriver. It's a little bit like the forehand in tennis. It's almost identical to the right hand in golf, with that extended forefinger and the thumb out in this position. And I want you to practice with it a little bit. This forefinger should be just about opposite your thumb, like this. There are some excellent variations of this extended finger grip. A slight rotation of your hand results in the extended V grip. I use this very comfortable and natural hand position for most of my casting and fishing. A further rotation offers another variation called the palm out grip. Used in long cast where optimum strength and wide casting arcs are required. I want you to change around and get comfortable. As much as possible, keep your hand reasonably close to your shoulder. On a short cast, it's almost like throwing darts. It's this motion. Put your hand up right now. Let's do it in pantomime together. Put your hand up and cast like this. It's almost like throwing darts. It's like hitting something with a hammer. Right in here, a short cast like this. As you get a little longer, move your hand out a little bit. And the optimum cast, you can throw that baseball now. Rear back, and you can make an optimum throwing position like this. I know all of this sounds hugely complicated to you people, especially those of you who are just beginning. Please don't be overwhelmed by it, though. As you actually begin to cast, it's all going to come into place for you. It's a simple concept. It's a little bit like taking short steps when you walk slowly and taking long steps when you walk faster. It's all going to come into place for you, I promise. For the moment, let me sum this up for you. Simply hold the rod with the extended finger grip. Keep your hands somewhat in front of you and try to be graceful. I'd like you to spend a good amount of time practicing good form without the rod, just like this. Good cast. Let's do some real casting now. The roll cast is the only method of fly casting that doesn't require a back cast. It's used to present a fly when there are obstacles behind you, like trees or rocks, or even a strong tailwind that might prevent a normal backcast. It's also used to reposition the line prior to a pickup. That might be roll casting a slack line into a straight position on the water, or roll casting a sunken line to the surface before picking it up, or even changing the direction of the line on the water. In addition to its many uses in actual fishing situations, the roll cast is the best cast to begin the development of a good fly casting stroke. Although it appears to be different than other casts, the feel of the casting stroke is quite similar and can be learned without the complexities of an aerialized line. Let's begin by working out 25 or 30 feet of line. Hook the line against the rod handle with the middle finger of your casting hand. Now lift the rod slowly, sliding the line in the water toward you. Raise your hand high. Tilt the rod slightly away from you so that the line can fall freely behind the rod. Now pull the rod down and over, aiming the cast slightly to the left of the line in the water, and the line should roll out in an oval-shaped loop and present the fly. The roll cast. As you get good with this, you should be doing it while the line is still moving, because then it planes on top of the water and makes a little easier roll cast. At first, I want you to bring it back, let the line stop, then come forward. As you get accustomed to this a little bit, as the line is still moving and falls behind the rod, come forward, and you'll make an easier roll cast. I want you to look very carefully at the shape of these loops as the line goes out on the water. A good loop is kind of elliptical, kind of oval shape as it races along the water, like that. And a poor shaped loop is one that's oval in shape the opposite way, or circular. It looks more like this. A poor loop takes place when you don't force a bend into the fly rod. This is a muscular kind of cast. This is the kind of cast where you have to force the rod to bend. If we don't get a bend in the rod and just try to use the rod as some large lever like this, we're going to get a poor loop and it's not going to drive out on the water. Also, if you apply power too early in the stroke, you're going to be throwing the line up instead of out. And it looks like this. It frequently is caused by cocking your wrist to get more power like this. You're going to throw the line power there and come forward. A poor loop. What you must do is get all the power in front, like this. Pow! The feeling is a little bit like just imagine that you had a hatchet in your hand or a meat cleaver and there was a chopping block in front of you about waist high. Your hand should come down and chop that right into the chopping block, right there, just like this. I want you to do it right now. Just take your hand up there, hold it high like this, and chop it down into the chopping block. Bang, it's right in there. That's what the feeling is like. I want you to stick the front end of the meat cleaver into the chopping block. Get a little point, bang, that little, right in there, just like that. A perfect roll casting stroke. And that application of power, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, that application of power is true in all forms of fly casting. Now I'd like to show you an interesting thing about the roll cast. Notice that I'm always casting to the left of the line in the water. To the left of the line in the water. In order to cast to the right of the line in the water, I can't bring the line back like this. Look what happens. It won't work. The only way that you can cast to the right of the line in the water is by bringing the line back over your left shoulder. Watch how that works. I must bring the line back over my left shoulder. Now I can cast to the right of the line in the water. Right shoulder cast. Left shoulder cast. You're going to need to be able to cast over your opposite shoulder in all of your fly casting. Sometimes the wind blows into your casting hand like this, and if you've got a fly on, it's blowing the line into you, and it's scary. You might get hit with the fly. The obvious thing to do is cast on this side of your body. If you cast on this side of the body, the wind is blowing the line away from you. You must learn how to cast off your opposite shoulder. All it takes is for me to rotate my hand into the extended V grip or the palm out grip and look at the top of the rod. With my hand in virtually the same position, I can move the tip over by simply rotating my hand. Left shoulder cast, right shoulder cast. Left shoulder, right shoulder. My hand stays in the same powerful position on the right-hand side of my head. Now that looks a little bit easier than it is. I really want you to practice that. That's going to be an important part of your casting and fishing experience. Now people, please spend at least a couple of hours on this roll cast using both shoulders. It's a really important part of fly casting. Now let's take a look at the roll cast as it would apply in a fishing situation. Here we are in the Rainbow River in Florida. Great black bass water. The problem here is that most of the good black bass are in heavy cover. And it's going to be a perfect place to show you how we work the roll cast. This is a perfect place for it. I'm standing here with my back against some heavy cover here. I can't make a normal back cast. And the bass are right there in the heavy cover there. And we're going to try rolling this fly, this light deer hair fly, right into that cover and see if we can pull something out. Let's give that a try. Work out some line here. Try not to make too much of a disturbance in the water. Remember how that roll cast is done now, guys. You got to come back slowly and let that line fall behind the rod and then chop forward. Let it float for a little bit. Now a retrieve. Now a retrieve. Come on, big bass. Come on. There's a fish that's risen a couple of times in there. Maybe we can get to that guy. Sometimes I like to vibrate the tip when I retrieve like this. That's it. Make that bug do nice things. Hey, there's a fish. Hey, good fish. Come on, big guy. Get you in here quick. Good fish, beauty. Get that fish back in the water. Beautiful fish. That's one of my favorite kinds of fishing. You better learn that roll cast. Good cast. Okay, let's go on to our next casting lesson. Our next cast now is the pick up and lay down, or the water cast. And just as the name implies, that's a pick up, cast behind you, and cast in front of you. Pick it up, lay it down. For the purposes of this cast, just like in the roll cast, I'd like you to hook the line with the middle finger of your casting hand and don't touch the line with your left hand. Roll that line out straight, pick it up and stop the rod in about this position so that the line rolls off the top of the rod. Come forward to about this position and let the line roll off the rod in front. Roll right off the tip of the rod. That's the cast. Cast, hesitate for a second. You must allow the line to straighten out behind you before you come forward. There's a hesitation there. Let's do that again. Cast, hesitate, forward to this position and down to the water. Don't run your tip down to the water the way most people are inclined to do, and by casting like this. You can see that I'm not getting a loop. This is a basic cast. What we're attempting to learn with this cast is how to make a loop. It's a very basic cast. A lot of time when my own casting gets a little bit sloppy, what I'll do, or if I have a strange rod in my hand, is I'll pick it up and lay it down. Get a little bit of feel of the rod before I actually start casting and false casting and shooting line and doing the other things that you do with a fly line. Pick it up, lay it down. What we want to strive for now on this pick up and lay down is something called good loops. A loop is the shape of the line as it comes off the end of the fly rod. And a good loop is kind of an inverted U or a V shape, and it looks like this. Watch this. This is a good loop as it slings over in that U shape. Good loop. You notice that I'm keeping a nice tight arc in the fly rod from here to right in here. If I open that up in a cast like this, I get a big, wide, fat loop or a non-loop. If you shock the rod or try to flip it or jerk the rod, you get something called a cross loop or a tailing loop, and it looks like this. Terrible. Terrible. You get all kinds of knots in your leader. I call them wind knots. They should be called casting knots. Terrible. Sling the line smoothly. A nice, beautiful, inverted U shape. Good loops are the key to good fly casting. These inverted U or V-shaped loops are somewhat similar to the airfoil shape of an airplane wing. In fact, these loops appear to defy gravity as they roll back and forth in the air. The fly line follows the path of the rod tip, so that the shape of the loop is determined by the path of the rod tip during the casting stroke. A straight line path of the rod tip forms the perfect aerodynamic shape of a good loop. A convex path of the rod tip results in a convex path of the fly line, a wide open or non-loop, and an ineffective cast. This roundhouse kind of swing is common with beginning fly casters, and it can be corrected by forcing the rod to bend or load, or by using a narrower casting arc. Tailing loops or cross loops are the result of a concave path of the rod tip. This dipping of the rod tip is usually caused by an erratic or premature application of power. Tailing loops can also be caused by a casting arc that is too small or too narrow for the amount of bend in the rod. In order to maintain a straight line path of the rod tip, you must adjust the size of the casting arc to fit the amount of bend in the rod. This simply means that short casts require a narrow casting arc, while longer casts require a wider casting arc. And obviously, the rod must bend or load during the casting stroke in order to maintain this straight line path of the rod tip. I'd like you to spend at least a couple of hours doing nothing but this pickup and lay down. And after that, we'll get into the false casting. The next phase of casting that we should get into is the false cast. After the pickup and lay down, we want to get you into the false cast. And the false cast, just as the name implies, a cast where you don't let the forward cast hit the water. Kind of cast it back and forth in the air a few times. Let me get out a little line here, and I'll show you what the false cast looks like, and tell you what we can use it for. Once again, in this practice, I'd like you to use only your rod hand and keep your left hand off the line. Let's roll the line out straight, and false casting, instead of a pickup and lay down where you follow the line to the water like that, now we're going to, just as the line straightens out in front, we're going to come back and keep the line in the air. False casting 5 or 6 times, and on the final cast we form the loop and come down to the water with the rod. False casting is used essentially to dry the dry fly. That means when you're dry fly fishing, even though you have floatant to keep them on top of the water, all of them pick up a little water. And what you must do in dry fly fishing for trout, for example, is to false cast it in the air, and that fly going back and forth in the air will dry out and then float very well again. The false cast is used not only to dry the dry fly, but to change distance and change direction of the fly line. But the false cast for you people developing a casting stroke is going to even be more significant. It's going to be significant because it's going to give you a real feeling of timing, that feeling of the line going back and forth in the air, and a feeling of really slinging the line, almost better than any other cast. So for the purposes of fishing, we don't want you to false cast all the time because the fish aren't up in the air, they're down in the water. But when you're practicing, I'd like you to practice at least 5 or 6 casts in the air before you present it to the water or the ground, the lawn, wherever you're casting. To hook it here, make 5 or 6 casts, smooth it out, change direction a little bit, open the loop up, tighten it up, get a nice feeling of the timing in the cast, and then make the cast, present to the water. That's the false cast, a wonderful cast. A good way to develop the real feel of fly casting is by relating the various casting strokes with different parts of a fly rod. Start with a tip cast, using only 10 or 15 feet of fly line. Maintain a narrow casting arc and try to feel the rod bending only at the very top. The unloading of the rod tip will feel as if the line is flicking back and forth in the air. Now, use a little more line. Increase the amount of power and the size of the casting arc. Notice that the rod is loading further down and it feels as if the line is flowing off the middle of the rod. The butt cast is a full wide arc casting stroke that uses the powerful butt section of the fly rod. Practice this cast using a pickup and laydown cast. Try to force a full bend in the fly rod starting right at the handle. The casting motion for this pickup and laydown butt cast is almost identical to the pulling, pointing, roll casting stroke. After you develop the feel of this cast, try a distance cast by tilting the entire casting stroke backward and aiming your forward cast higher in the air. On all of these casts, try to imagine that you are actually putting a casting loop into the rod itself. The problem with a program like this, and the problem with all instruction, is that we get so overwhelmed with all of the details and things that we have to remember that we forget the essence of what we're doing. And the essence of fly casting is a very, very simple thing. It's just a feeling of applying power and slinging the line out. But that application of power is kind of a subtle thing. I want to try to communicate that to you now, and it's a difficult thing. It's probably different than what you imagine it to be. It's a slinging motion. You know, Paul Young, an American rod builder, described it this way. Imagine a long willow stick with an apple stuck on the end of it. If you wound up and tried to sling that apple through the air and came forward smoothly and accelerated and hit it right out there, you could throw that apple a long ways. But if you come forward too quick, the apple's going to fall off. The feel of loading and slinging a fly line. It's a little bit like bait casting. Some of you people who have a soft shrimp or a bait on the end of a surf rod or a pier rod, you wind up and hurl the bait through the air like that, and the soft bait pulls off the hook and falls down. If you kind of start slow and sling that thing out there, the bait stays with it. That's a little bit of the feel of fly casting. You golfers, when you hit from the top, you're hitting back here instead of getting the power right out in front like you should be doing with a fly rod. It's hitting from the top a little bit. They once said to Sam Snead, What do you think when you make that picture-perfect, beautiful golf swing? He said, I think oily. I want you people to think oily, too. I kind of suspect that Sam would be a good fly caster. Think oily. Sling that line. It's a little bit like a slingshot. You pull it back, it goes... Try to load that rod and sling the line. In some of your practice, I'd like you to forget about the mechanics of the dance. Think only of the rhythm of the music. Now I'm going to let you use your left hand. Let's get into the next session of our casting. I'm going to teach you how to shoot line a little bit. And that's the way to get real distance in fly casting, by shooting line. And also the use of your line hand. We're going to step into that position right now. I'm going to turn around and face in this direction so that you can watch my left hand. You know, in order to fly cast, what we have to do is anchor the line when we're casting. And what we've been doing in our practice on the roll cast and the pick up and lay down and the false cast till now is anchoring it with our rod hand. Now we're going to work with the line hand and the rod hand. And this is how we do it. Let me cast out here first and just show you how this works. I'm going to get out about 25 or 30 feet of my weight forward line. Strip off maybe another 5 or 10 feet of line here. I'm going to stretch it a little bit. Okay, I'm going to shoot this line now. I'm going to hold it tightly with my left hand, cast with my right hand, make a couple of false casts to get a good feeling, and the last cast, shoot it. See how that line shoots out? Now watch carefully what we're going to do with our hands. I'm going to grab this line right here in my rod hand. And with my line hand, I'm going to retrieve the line by pulling the line through my rod hand in this manner. This is how you fish. This is how you control a fly line. And you always pull it from behind the rod hand. The reason that we strip it from behind the rod hand like this is because if we reached in front of the rod hand and grabbed the line like this and pulled it back, we lose control. And we try to catch it with that finger, drop it, and reach forward. It's a sure way to get a strike because you're going to miss it just as sure as anything. What you must always do is strip from behind your rod hand to always keep control on the fly line. Now let's go back to that shooting line again. Get out about 25 or 30 feet of line, have some extra line held over here, roll cast that line out straight. We want to keep our anchor hand comfortably at our side and cast like this, keeping that anchored. Get a few casts until we really get it going good. On the final cast, let go, and the line will shoot out if you form that beautiful loop. What you've just got to do is form that loop. Form that loop, and that's going to carry the line out. Don't try to hurl the line out. Just sling that line off the tip of the rod and it's going to go. Hook it back in your finger like this, strip it back in, and do it again. This is a wonderful exercise for you, both in terms of manipulating the line and anchoring the line like this. One of the dangers of this cast is that you frequently see people in a river casting like this. I don't want you to do that. I want you to keep your line hand comfortably at your side and hold tight with this line hand so that the line is anchored well. One of the things that you must not do is let line slip out here because you're going to lose control of the line. Hold it tightly, and it's only on the last cast where you cast it out and let it sling that you've got it. I'm going to turn around and cast one right at you so that you get a little bit of a feeling of that. Cast it. I'm going to false cast it around so I can change direction. Now I'm going to cast it right at you. There goes the loop. Cast and let go, and it slings right out. Beautiful. Strip it back. Fish that around. Ah! Strike. Okay. Let's go on to our next little session in fly casting. the Bahamas on a bonefish flat, and the wind is blowing a little bit, and in a situation like this, the double haul is a super important concept. It's something that you have to have in order to handle this casting situation well. What I'd like you to do is go out today and buy a line, buy a shooting taper, buy it because it's not only a valuable tool in fishing, it's an incredibly valuable and important tool in learning how to fly cast well. Double pull. One of the ways we're going to learn it, you saw me before in the class teaching it to a group of students. What I'd like you to do right now is to stand up. Right now. Do it now. I promise you, in 5 or 10 minutes, I guarantee you you'll be able to do that double haul. Okay. The double haul, we're going to do it without a rod. I want you to just watch me now. Don't do anything, just watch. I'm going to hold a rod in my right hand. I'm going to hold a line tightly in my left hand. I'm going to have 5 or 6 feet of overhang and drop my right foot back so I can sway and move with it a little bit. And I'm going to do something like down up. I want you to learn something right now. It's a new word. It's called down up. It is not down and it's not up. It's a new word. It's down up. One word and one motion. Your left hand must do this. I want it to bounce when it comes down. I want it to go bang like this. Down up. Do it with your left hand right now. Take your left hand, your line hand, and go down up. Down up. It must never do this. Got to go down up. This is a crazy little thing, guys. It's like scratching your head and rubbing your stomach or doing some odd thing like that. Something is going to go click in your head, and you're going to have it. And we're going to make that thing go click in just the next few minutes. Right foot back. First, watch me. Rod in the right hand. Line held tightly in the left hand. 5 or 6 feet of overhang. I'm going to go down up. Hold it back there. I want to just take time. I'm going to go forward. Down up. Down up. Cast. Whoosh. Beautiful. That's all there is to it, though. And that last cast, you pull and let go. Now everybody get up. Stand right up in front of this screen and look at me. Stick your right hand out. In fact, stick your finger out just like this. Hold the line tightly with your left hand. Don't go any faster than I'm going. I want you to go at exactly the speed that I'm going. Hold the line tightly with your left hand. We've got 5 or 6 feet of overhang. Let's go down up. Hold it right there, just like this. Ready? Let's go down up. Do it with me. Down up. We're going to take a lot of time. Down up. Down up. We're going to cast this one now. Pull and let go. Do that for the next 10 minutes, and I absolutely guarantee you that you'll have it for the rest of your life. If you don't learn this in 10 or 15 minutes, call me up and I'll fly out and give you personal lessons. I guarantee you can learn the double haul that easily. We take large groups of people and teach 20 or 30 people simultaneously this double haul, and invariably everyone learns it within 15 minutes. One of the keys to learning this, however, is to buy that shooting taper for one of your middle range rods, a 5, 6, 7, or 8 weight rod, and buy a shooting head for it and practice it on the lawn. I promise you, you'll have it in no time flat. The double haul, wonderful cast. And it's fun. It's really a fun thing. You know what we're going to do now? We're going to go out in these flats, Rudy and I, and we're going to try to catch one of these bonefish. My first one. I'm going to take a weight forward floating line, and we're going to try for one of these elusive bones. Rudy's going to pull us across these flats. We're going to try to find the fish first. We're not going to just cast blindly in this water. We're going to try to find the fish, and we're going to have to make the cast to him. And Rudy has assured me, unless we can get out at least 50 or 60 feet, we're going to spook these fish. These fish are very spooky in this skinny water, this super clear shallow water from 6 inches to 2 feet. So we have to make a 50 or 60 foot cast. I hope it works out. We're going to give it our best shot.
You want out there? You want out there? Right out there.
Right there?
Right out there. Yeah, right out there.
Okay, I got him. Double pull, this one goes. He's following. He's following. He got it. He got it.
Keep your chip up. Keep your chip up.
Right, look at that guy again.
Pull behind him. Oh, that's a nice size one. That's a nice one. He's 9 pounds.
Coming in.
Keep the tip up, is he?
You sucker. Look at that beautiful fish. Look at that
You
little
got
jewel.
him.
Look at that little jewel. But here we are now in Alaska, in the land of the bears and the eagles, and we're fishing for silver salmon at the outlet of Ugashik Lake. We're using heavy lines here and heavy flies, and the wind is blowing badly, and we really have difficulty in controlling our casts. I want to show you a new cast here, and I want to explain that you must wear sunglasses all the time that you're fly casting. And many times I've left mine off in order to have eye contact with you folks. But you must wear sunglasses when you're fly casting. It's important. The cast is a cast called a Belgian cast. It's a wonderful cast. It's a very simple thing to do. It's kind of a sidearm back cast and an overhead forward cast. And what we do is underpower the cast a little. We kind of swing it around, bang, like that. We keep pressure on it. The feeling is a little bit like if you were trying to throw the line in a circle around your head. And as long as you keep pressure on the line like that, you can't get hit with it, no matter how hard the wind's blowing. Well, this cast works just like that. You swing it around to the side and over the top, and you keep pressure on the line all the time. It's kind of a swing-around cast. And you don't have to make a big, wide sidearm cast like that on overhead cast. You can make a little bit of an oval. All fly casting should be with a backward cast and the forward cast on a little different plane. And the Belgium cast is just constant pressure like that, and it's an easy thing to do. I want you to try it and practice it. Let's go out and see if we can catch one of those cohos. There's a bunch of those guys right out here. Get that head going. Kind of a sidearm back cast and an overhead forward cast. Sidearm, overhead. Sidearm, and let her go. Let that guy sink just a little bit. They're there. I saw a bunch of them rolling. Just kind of a swing around motion. Swing around and let it go. Let that guy sink. Sink, down, down, down. That ought to be about right. Dump, 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 dump. Ah! I got it! Want to clear that line on the reel. Hey! Great fish. Another run. You're not going to make it easy, are you, Big? Look at him go. Beautiful fish, beautiful country. Great fish. Let's go on now and look at some presentation casts. We've spent most of our time learning how to cast a fly, learning how to throw those loops, learning to control the line in the air. And that's the most difficult part of casting a fly. Now let's get into the most important part of fly casting, and that's presenting the fly to the fish. Presentation. How do we actually get that fly to the fish? Let's take a look at a few of the casts that we've been working with. The first cast that we look at is the one that most of you have been using in the practice, and that's a straight line presentation. That's where we cast a fly straight down to the water like this, and everything is tight to the rod. It's a beautiful accuracy cast. It's a good cast to put immediate control on the fly for an instant retrieve like this in bass fishing and in tarpon fishing and in a wet fly situation. It's the most commonly used cast of all, and it's made by either throwing a cast off the top of the rod or a regular tip cast, following it to the water so that the line is nice and straight. Or it can be done with the butt cast, where we drive the line right straight down like that, the powerful butt cast, where we're handling a wind or very long cast. In trout fishing, however, there are many times when we don't want that straight line cast. What we want in trout fishing is a slack line cast. What we want to do is present most of our dry flies in a natural drifting position, and even some of our wet flies. And that means that the fly has to float naturally in the water without the pull of the line on it. One of the ways that we do that is by extending the tippet, the very end of the leader, and we make it thinner and longer. George Harvey, that great Eastern fly fisherman and instructor, advocated the use of long, delicate tippets. And that enables the fly to float naturally on the water. What we must do, in addition to having a long, delicate tippet, is we must get slack in the fly line. If this line were all out straight like this on the water, every little nuance of current and wind and water movement will affect the fly. Trout are sitting there in their hole, facing into the current, and watching naturals come by. And the naturals are virtually weightless. Little movement in the surface film, and they come over like this, and like this. And then your fly comes over, and it's attached to a line. And it frequently comes over like this. And the trout isn't going to take it. It's a wary animal. It's not going to take that. It's not a natural drift. And you, standing 25 or 30 or 40 feet away, cannot tell if you're getting a good drift of the fly. One of the things that we do to ensure that is, instead of allowing the line to come straight down on the water, what we do is get a lot of slack in the line. And there's a bunch of ways of doing that. One of the ways that I use most often is a cast called the bounce cast. It's a simple cast. In fact, all of these presentation casts are not hard once you learn the basic cast. Extremely important, but not hard. The bounce cast. Just cast it out over the water with a little more power than necessary, and it bounces back, and I get all this slack between my rod and the fly. Perfect way to get slack in a situation where there are not really heavy currents, where the currents are heavier. Then you need a cast called the wiggle cast, or the S cast. And it's an easy cast too, and kind of fun. As the loop is going out, I wiggle the rod from side to side. Look at all those wiggles in the line. That's a wonderful thing, because while the current is moving all this line here, the fly is floating perfectly naturally. The wiggle cast, one of the really excellent ones. There's another cast that I use, and that I consider one of the most important casts in trout fishing and in fly fishing in moving water. And that's a cast called the reach cast. The reach cast was popularized by Doug Swisher and Carl Richards. Really an excellent cast. And once again, it's an easy cast. I use this reach cast in almost every moving water situation. It looks like this. All I do with this cast is I cast out and reach with the rod. Look what I've got here. Look at that big bow. And you don't destroy your accuracy with that cast, because the cast is going straight out. You're just moving the back end over. It is a wonderful downstream fishing technique. Work on it a little bit. Think in terms of presentation to the fish. Don't cast at the fish. Especially in moving water, think in terms of the current taking your fly to the fish. If you see a fish rising in the water, try to cast well above the fish so that the current brings the fly down to where the fish is feeding. Imagine yourself as a fish in this shallow water where he's feeding. He's always afraid of predators coming at him from above, and his food is not smacking down right on top of him. The food is drifting down with the current toward him. The other factor that you have to consider when casting to these fish is you must never false cast over the fish. The line going back and forth over the fish is going to frighten them and spook them. Fish are very, very frightened in this shallow water. Look at it from the fish's viewpoint. There he is in the shallow water, and that line is bang, bang, bang over the top of him. You don't want to do that. The fish is over there. False cast here. Measure it here. That's right. That's about the right distance. Final cast, turn around and present to the fish. Perfect. That fish now has no reason to be frightened. Come on, fish. There he is. Nice fish. Nice fish. This is Squaw Creek at the Take It Easy Ranch. And this is a catch and release area. I'd like to talk to you about catch and release for just a moment. It's a hard concept to really get across to people who have never experienced it. And I'd like to talk to you about some of the possibilities in catch and release. I usually do 2-day seminars where I conclude the seminar with a movie called The Way of a Trout. In the final scene of A Way of a Trout, the old gentleman takes the fish and puts it back into the water. He lets it go and the music plays and everybody starts clapping when I do something like that. One day a little 11-year-old boy jumped up. He said, "I wouldn't have let that fish go." And I understood what he was saying. Everybody got real quiet for a moment. And I really understood that most of the people that were sitting there and listening, they wouldn't have let that fish go either. I suspect that most of you wouldn't have let that fish go. There's a real argument about killing a fish, I think. Jacques Cousteau said that he thinks that sport fishing is a perversion. And I understand that a little bit. After all, we're doing something that's really natural to man. We're going out and capturing something that's lesser than we. We catch them and we kill them and we eat them, and that's a normal, natural thing for man to do. Releasing them is kind of making a sport out of something that's genuine and real. I guess you could call that a perversion. I think that those of you who are starting into it and you want to catch and kill a fish, I think it's a wonderful thing. I think you should do it. I think that's what hunting is and that's what fishing is. And I don't want you to feel guilty about that. I want you to let all the conservation organizations and the magazines and the instructors like myself make you feel guilty about that. But I must also tell you that there's another side of the story. There's a side of the story about rivers that don't have enough fish for all the population that are fishing, so we have to make laws, like this river. There are so many people fishing on this river that if we kept all the fish we caught, there wouldn't be anything left for us to fish in. I think we have to make laws so that we release the fish. But even more importantly, I think there's a philosophic concept in releasing fish that I'd like you to consider. I know that it's not logical to catch one of these animals and then put them back in the water again. I know that it's almost an unreasonable thing. But I think it might be a noble thing that man does. I think it might be like religion. It might be some concept that man has that's more than what he is. He satisfies his hunting need, puts the fish back in the water, and feels good about it. I can only tell you how I personally feel. I started releasing fish because of peer pressure, because of rules that were made in some of the rivers I fished. And that's how I started to do it. And it was painful at first. But I want to tell you something. I prefer releasing fish now. It makes me feel good. I can't really tell you the reasons it makes me feel good. I can only tell you that when I hold the fish in the water and I can feel the life come into the fish and feel him move off, it makes me feel real good. I want you to try it, people. I want you to try releasing a few fish. And I hope that feeling happens with you, too.